An interesting little post came across my social media recently that said, would you want to live in the world you've been writing? And I replied to it, I already do. I born and raised in Bloomington, and I've always felt that the whole area has something a little benevolently strange about it. And our esteemed former mayor, Mark Cruzan, sort of codified that for me because he remarked once that the perfect anagram for Bloomington is moonlit balm. So, and I said, oh, I know what kind of a city that is. So I started writing a series of fabulous stories about the city called Moonlit Balm. And they're all kind of little prose poems about what we actually see every day here in the area, and sort of the strangeness, the strange edge of it. So this is one of those stories in that collection that I call Stonehead. Not too far outside Moonlit Balm, in the densely forested hills, stands a big farmhouse right where one road broadsides another in a T, whose main thrusting leg could go right on up to the front door of the two-story white box, no porch, no shutter, right on up to the door and through the hallway, sheer off the staircase's carved newel post, and shatter the door frame into the back utility hallway, and then do the same to the back door on its way to the backyard and the chicken house. But the T-leg has an excellent reason to stop. The Stonehead man sits before the house, before the door. The Stonehead man sits before the house, before the door, where gravel has widened the road just enough to enable a traveler to step off it and look more closely at the Stonehead man. Breastbone downward, a square limestone block, half buried in the house's front yard. Breastbone upward, no clothing, no anatomy, no personal details of muscle or inherited features. His gaze is reserved and distant. He would rather be somewhere else. Oval face, round cheeks, flat chin, small mouth, lips set, painted on hairline recedes. Stonehead man expresses resigned irritation. Perhaps another generation will come into being before his hair is repainted. But will that painter be sympathetic? Give him a bit of style? The smoothness of his square block torso enables the bearing of stony information. 2 town names, beneath them arrows, pointing in opposite directions, the T's arms. Change direction, traveler, he says. Turn left, turn right, or go back the way you came, but move on. The traveler who encounters Stonehead man head-on has just come from the city of Moonlit Balm, a twisting road, conflicted with itself, but the main road into Moonlit Balm from this place. The traveler, a bicyclist, has just emerged from under that city's dream-filled skies, a little shattered, sweating. During a clear sunset, or right after a rain, or when a mourning dove calls its note, the traveler might hear Stonehead man say, "Any news? For me?" and see a wistful look pass over the stone man's face. Maybe Stonehead man wishes he were somewhere else, but he is here. Stonehead man is the outermost member of Moonlit Balm's next secret society. People in motion on their bicycles, on their feet, they glance at this society's members and keep moving. A society of stillness, immovable as stone, bronze, steel. Stonehead man looks toward them from afar, listening for any news that might concern him or his silent, immovable love. His love, his captured love, a giant woman nude and voluptuous, looking over nude and voluptuous among leaping fish and geysering water. Immobile, her back is arched, a fish between her thighs. The fish looks up at her, but her face is turned over her shoulder, looking for Stonehead Man, wherever he is. The unmoving and unmoved secret society's other members observe and comment on the people in motion around them. They gossip about the enchanted lovers, Fountain Woman and Stonehead Man. Poised and placed, their lives are captured in motionless metal and stone. They have duties and purpose. The big-bellied teacher sits on his bench, smiles and reaches out. He's safe for anyone to talk to. The war correspondent, who is no longer allowed to smoke, works at his typewriter and longs for a cigarette between his bronze lips. Sophia, an accordion player, surveys the long trail where citizens may roller skate as she does. She keeps up with another of her society, placed along the same trail, a tough broad who misses her spaceship. She waits to be born in Moonlit Bong so she can get her spaceship back. Be still and listen. You may hear the voices of the abstract shapes and materials sculpted with the imagination that connects them to the dreams in the skies of Moonlit Bong. Empty chairs at a banquet table offering a steaming bowl. Steel flames, sole remnants of a guitar player in full exuberance. A ladder of light and colors. Bears! Where? There! Papa, Mama, and baby on Mama's lap. The children of Moonlit Bong spend years petting the white stone to greasy gray. Above the sidewalk of Moonlit Bong's central square, a woman with a book and a soldier on attack perch, frozen, keeping the memory of war and the numbers of dead up high, out of the citizens' sightlines, never dropping those memories to litter the streets. They don't even complain to each other anymore, but they are glad to be up so high, no citizen of Moonlit Bong can see their real expressions. Above those two, highest of all, a golden fish turns with the wind, observing all. The dreams of Moonlit Bong rise past the fish and lodge in the sky, the moving clouds. The fish turns and nods to his comrades below, the lady with the book and the soldier on attack. The secret society of stillness isn't silent among themselves about the situation of Stonehead Man and Fountain Woman. Which of them was frozen first into silent form? Was the woman living in the house at that crossroads years ago a sorcerer who captured them? The gossip doesn't go much farther than that because it easily makes them wonder how they came to their own stillness. What brought them here? They had only tried to do good things when they were in motion. Move on, traveler, the society thinks in their stillness. Don't linger, especially don't linger at that farmhouse. Get back on your bicycle and move on. Somebody somewhere in Moonlit Bong took pity on Fountain Woman and Stonehead Man some years ago and placed the primal lovers, Adam and Eve, between them, in bronze, permanently naked in the woods, eyes fixed on each other, but never actually touching, no matter how long they stand there reaching. But near Fountain Woman, near Adam and Eve, sits the Piano Man. People leave him flowers, remembering how his music sent their dreams up into the sky like birds, like skylarks. Piano Man thinks about the Fountain Woman and Stonehead Man, about Adam and Eve, never commenting. When people in motion leave flowers for him, their memories of love songs embedded in those flowers rise up to the dreaming skies, and the Piano Man adjusts the breeze to carry songs to Stonehead Man, who knows by now where they come from and what they mean. Thank you. And then this is a new short story that is completing a collection I have of stories based on my grandfather's life growing up in Monroe County on a farm over like Rogers Street area. And so this is, and they're interlocked stories with like that follow three families through about 135 years of time in Monroe County. And so this is based on an actual incident in my grandfather's life as he was coming from basic training in Kansas, he's going to head over to be a machine gunner in the Great War in 1917. So this is called All That Could Be Done. Rusty dreamed he plowed up Stan's grave without meaning to, using the new gas-powered tractor that had come to the farm somehow. His family stood around staring at the machine, at the multiple blades drawn behind the wheels. Rusty alone had the courage to leap joyfully into the seat and grasp the controls. How it shone! How it moved fluidly under his hands, its engine like a song. He rolled it into a spring green field under a blue sky. The work would be easy now, Rusty felt in the dream. And then there was a bump, and a severed hand flew up out of the earth. An awful groaning followed. Rusty was too startled to stop the machine. It continued into the pure green field, and more body parts leapt up from below its wheels. The groaning rose louder and filled the dream. Rusty could not stop the tractor, nor even steer it. He twisted around to look behind them, and Stan's face, separated from the rest of his body, stared at him, open-mouthed, from the dirt. Rusty spasmed awake. "Ma!" A soldier moaned loudly in his sleep nearby. "Ma!" Rusty held still and collected his wits. He was surrounded by sleeping soldiers on a train bench, and he himself was a soldier. This was the train bearing new minted privates and corporals from their basic training at Fort Riley, Kansas, out to Virginia, where a ship waited to transport them to the fighting in France. America was at last a part of the Great War. The ratcheting train wheels and gentle rocking had shaped his dream like the soldier's moan, and Rusty realized he needed to find the latrine. He picked his way gently among the sleeping soldiers sprawled around the car. There were too many of them. They'd been standing in the aisle during transit and now curled together on the floor as well as on the benches. Rusty made it to the stinking cubbyhole and back to find his seatmate had spread out across the bench. Rusty imagined his snores hummed with gratitude. Nonetheless, he lifted the man's arms and shoved his body towards the window to reclaim a few inches of seat for himself. The other man mumbled but did not wake. Looking at the man's still hands and face, Rusty remembered his dream of flying body parts and shuddered. He whispered a prayer for Stan's soul and dropped into a doze that never quite robed itself in sleep. Morning came with an energetic tenor voice singing reveille, clear and loud. The train's porters stepped through, laden with trays of paper-wrapped bacon and egg sandwiches and tin mugs of coffee. Soldiers groaned and swore and moved themselves aside. In the chaos of young men swearing and coughing and eating and trying to get through the crowd to the latrine, Rusty remembered what day it was. He reached across his seatmate to draw aside the blackout curtain over their window. Morning sun washed over the back fields of farms, as it had in Kansas and Missouri and Illinois, but this, Rusty knew by the train schedule he had memorized, was Indiana. In a short time, the train would pass his hometown, Hinton, on the track that bent southward and bordered his family's farm. Rusty flung out a long, skinny arm to grab a porter by the sleeve and begged to know the time. Only just gone 8, so he had an hour to wait. He munched his sandwich, sipped weak coffee, and reflected on the dream. He did not divine it as an omen. Instead, he counted the sweeps of emotion and decision since the day Stan had died. If the once powerful, smiling giant of Hinton, Stan Sweat, had not died, or had not come back from a Kansas wheat farm broken in body, would Rusty, his baby brother, be on this train? "You dwell on ifs and maybes, you won't accomplish a thing," had been Dad's motto for years. Stan agreed. "Just get up in the morning and smell the air," Stan said. "That and the light in the sky, you'll know what can be done alongside what's got to be done." Rusty saw his situation two ways. One, his dad had gone to Kansas at 20 to make his fortune ridding the cattle lands of wolves, and came back only slightly better off. And then Stan had answered a newspaper ad for wheat farm workers in Kansas, promising good money, but he returned with his formidable back a wrenched up mess. Now, here was Rusty, the baby, the poetry lover, the high school graduate, coming back from Kansas, a full Army corporal trained to operate the highest treasure in the military's arsenal, the Browning M1917 machine gun. There was a literary progress to it that Rusty liked. Youngest son passes the test and attains the kingdom. The other way Rusty saw things, Stan's death was wrong on all counts. It needn't have happened, but the old doctor wouldn't do what had to be done, whatever that was. The little old man with the huge mustache had simply shuffled into the kitchen, where Stan lay on the table, shirtless, ready for whatever would relieve his terrible pain. The old doc instructed Sister how to hold the chloroform cone and sponge up blood. Rusty, Mom, Dad left for the front parlor, repulsed by the chloroform smell and knowing what had to come next. Sister told them later that the old doctor had indeed cut Stan open at the location of the appendix, then just looked around inside and sewed him back up again. "Too late, it's burst. The poison's all through him. Nothing to be done," he'd said, and shuffled out of the house. Ma and Dad went to Stan, but Rusty stood on the porch and watched in disbelief as the little old man climbed into the buggy he'd been driving around the county since Adam met Eve, and whistled the two mares into motion. Soon the buggy was gone, and soon after that, so was Stan. Word came to the Sweat farm the next day as they prepared Stan's body for burial that the doctor's buggy hadn't been seen again until the mares found their way to the barn at dawn. The old doc was dead in the driver's seat. The literary progress of that wasn't lost on anyone. Rusty kept his mouth shut, and he wasn't inclined to be as forgiving as some. That doctor had said, "Nothing to be done." Well, Rusty felt differently about the whole thing. It was like Stan had said, smelling in the air what can be done and what's got to be done. There was so much that could have been done. If it had been the younger doctor pulling up to the house in his shiny black Model T, he would have had medicines and methods. He would have seen and known what to do. He would have taken action. But he'd been out of town. Something about his family couldn't be helped. That was another phrase Rusty had bitter feelings for. Even on the train, with his mouth dark with coffee, Rusty held it a blessing that the United States joined the Great War on the same April day that the Sweats buried Stan. Rusty and Sister had looked at each other when the news broke, and Sister was silent, which was unusual for her. She only nodded, and then Rusty nodded. He would go, she would look after Ma and Dad, their frailty new and sharp in grief. They were agreed without saying so on what could be done and what had to be done. He felt closer to her right then than he had in a long time. The strength to do all that could be done and had to be done was thick around him, waiting, restless in these young men. He felt it building in him during basic training, in the exercises and drills and shouting, marching, cursing. If all his reading and scratching in his notebooks had made him feel a part of the world of learning and poetry, this decision of his to join up to the Great War put him in a new place. he had been handed the power to do unheard of things. He had been given the Browning M1917, which was not a pen nor a plow, but something else entirely. The train car lurched and groaned. The ratcheting slowed. Rusty gulped the rest of his coffee and put both the cup and the wadded sandwich paper into his pocket. Outside, the train was passing a grain elevator and some wooden buildings. They were just north of Hinton. "Switch with me," Rusty gasped to his seatmate, who had had a mouthful of sandwich. "I need the window! Quick, quick!" The soldier moved, adroitly chewing and preventing his coffee from spilling. He swallowed. "What's up, Sweaty?" "We're going to pass my family's farm, that's what!" "Yeah? Well, that's all right then." He turned to the crowded car. "Hey, hey, troops!" he shouted. "We're going to pass Gunner Sweat's farm, Sweaty's house, on the right here." Soldiers looked up, interested. Hinton was not a spread-out town, and by the time young men were standing or crouched at the open windows, the train was steaming southward. "They know you're coming?" Rusty's seatmate asked. "I don't know," he answered truthfully. "I wrote them as soon as I knew the day, but I don't know if it reached them." "You point out the place. We'll give it a wave no matter what," the soldier said. Rusty wished he could remember the bright-eyed young man's name. He did know that, like Rusty, he had joined up directly after graduating from his own high school. Rusty never had to point out the farm. "Look! Look at that! Look!" came the whooping shout from far down the car. "Ain't that a sight?" It was nothing Rusty had expected. His folks had indeed gotten his letter in time and had alerted the neighbors, the church, and who knows who else. Dozens of them stood in the stubbled rows of the cornfield that had just been harvested. The back field was rich with people, waving their arms, waving small American flags, shouting at the train. Rusty saw Ma and Dad holding hands, waving their hats so that their gray heads were full of sun. Sister was there, a flag in each hand. Her chin was high and firm as it always had been and always would be. The soldiers right next to the windows stuck their arms out and waved, hollered, whooped right back. Rusty put out his hand but did not wave. He opened it and held it there, reaching to them but also gathering in all of them to his palm for safekeeping, to keep them his own. And then they were gone. The train moved past. The soldiers drew themselves back in, laughing and talking. The wonder of it, all those people! What a send-off! Someone started singing, "Over there!" Soon the whole car was in voice. Rusty stayed at the window, his arm outside, his hands scooping up the wind and the fields and the woodlots and the barns, all of Davie County, all of it Davie County, his only home until now. A soldier stuck his head in from the next car down, his face shining, and asked if everyone here had seen that. "Seen it? We got the man right here!" It was Rusty's seatmate who shouted over the singing. He grabbed Rusty's shoulder and hauled him in. "That was Gunner Sweat's people! Sweaty's house! His folks!" And the other soldiers were cheering him, applauding and shouting their nickname for him, which maybe they had heard for the first time just now. "Sweaty! You'll do 'em proud, Sweaty, for Pop and Mom and Uncle Sam," and other jubilant nonsense. They slapped and thumped him, grabbed and pounded and shook him as if he were bread dough in Ma's wooden bowl. Someone's hand found his head and roughly tousled his red curls. Rusty still had the vision of his family and neighbors in his mind, the feel of the wind in his hand. But it was the soldiers' voices, their hands, that brought him back to the rocking train car, awakening him from a dream into their presence. They welcomed him. He belonged here. He had brought them this farewell. He was theirs now. His hands, still cupping the wind, crept to his chest and flattened. Hinton and his family entered his heart's still, small, protected place. The open windows were freshening the air and breezing out the smell of too many men. Among them, he would never answer to the name Rusty again. He was Sweaty now. Gunner Sweat. He had the special training and the weapon that would protect them all, that would win the war. He smiled into their faces, sharing his own joy at being here, triumphant in a life that had just begun.